This is our third class on sex, and I think sex is such an important topic to discuss with young people because they're bombarded with messages about sex from almost everywhere in our culture. I mean, billboards, television shows, movies, music videos, books, everywhere. And much of that message is the same message. And I want to go after this message by talking about a music video by Taio Cruz. The music video is called Break Your Heart. Break Your Heart came out about a month ago, and it reached the Billboard Top 100 53, at number 53 during the first week. And after the next week, it hit number 1. This was the biggest jump in Billboard history. On iTunes, it's anywhere between 1 and 8 these days. So young people have heard it, and it's worth discussing because of the message that it gives. In the beginning, Taio Cruz and his girlfriend are driving in a convertible, and they're going to a party on a yacht. There's a ton of people on the yacht, and Taio Cruz and his girlfriend say to one another, "You know, I'm just going to break your heart. Just going to break your heart." And they're like, "Yeah, sure, why not? It sounds like fun." So they go to the yacht party, and they end up making out with everyone, trying to make one another jealous, and other people on the boat jealous of them. So it's about jealousy. It's about using one another's bodies. And what ends up happening at the end of the video is that Taio Cruz and his girlfriend get back together as if nothing ever happened. It's like, it's cool, whatever, I'm not angry, you didn't break my heart, it's cool. So the message that's given here is that you can use and abuse one another's bodies for your own sexual gratification, and nothing bad is going to happen. Well, young people know that this message is a myth. It's false. And we need a place to come together and talk about it and critique it. And one of the ways that I want to do that is by going to the Bible and looking at the story of King David. King David is chosen as king. He's the second king of Israel, and he's chosen as king partly because he's the youngest of 9 brothers, and he's the shepherd of his family's flock. So he knows what it means to be vulnerable. The youngest of 9 brothers, you're pretty vulnerable. And he knows how to take care of the vulnerable. Sheep can't take care of themselves. They need a shepherd. So David knows what it means to be vulnerable and how to protect the vulnerable. This is one of the reasons why he's chosen as king. But what ends up happening when he becomes king is he begins to be overcome by this power, and he abuses it. And one of the ways that he abuses it is with a woman named Bathsheba. Bathsheba is the wife of Uriah. Uriah is one of the great commanders in David's army. And while the army is away, David looks out over his kingdom and he sees Bathsheba. And he calls Bathsheba into his quarters. David is attracted to Bathsheba, calls her over to his palace, and they have sex. Now, you can't blame Bathsheba for this, because when the king calls you to do something, you got to do it or you're going to get your head chopped off. So they have sex, and Bathsheba gets pregnant, and David has to hide this. So he ends up calling Uriah back, telling Uriah to sleep with his wife. Uriah refuses to do it because back in the day, when your buddies were off at war, you weren't going to have sex with your wife because that's betraying your buddies. So he ends up sleeping outside. David ends up covering this up by sending Uriah to the front lines, where Uriah is sure to be killed. And indeed, Uriah is killed. So David and Bathsheba get married. But it turns out that people put 2 and 2 together. By the time that David and Bathsheba get married, it's only a few months until Bathsheba gives birth. And people put 2 and 2 together, and they end up thinking, wow, David and Bathsheba had sex before they got married, about the time that Uriah died. So they end up thinking that David actually covers this up by sending Uriah to the front lines. Well, a prophet Nathan comes to David. He's not going to come to David saying, "Oh, look at you, you're evil, what have you done?" He tells David a story. Because if he goes and says, "Look at you, what have you done?" he's likely to get his head chopped off. So instead he tells David a story. And the story goes essentially like this. There were 2 neighbors. One was rich, the other was poor. The rich neighbor had all of these sheep, hundreds of sheep, and the poor neighbor only had 1. Well, somebody came to visit the rich neighbor, and the rich neighbor was going to get dinner ready. So he had to kill a sheep. So he ends up killing the poor man's sheep instead of killing one of his own. And David gets all upset, and he says, how could he do that? He had all of these sheep. All he had to do was kill one of his own. And he says, "That man deserves to die." And Nathan says to David, "David, you are that man." And David has this point of recognition, this point of repentance, where he understands the harm that he has caused to other people. He was trying to fulfill his sexual desires, so he used other people in order to do that. And this is where David has this repentance, and he sees that what he did was wrong. Now, what does this story have to do with how we talk to young people about sex and sex in our culture? Well, I think that our first message has to be sex is good. We can't tell young people sex is bad. Sex is a good thing, but sex can easily be abused when we use it to gain power over another or just simply use it for our own self-gratification. How anyone can have sex in a mutually life-affirming, loving way these days is difficult, because the message that we're given of culture is just use one another. So I think that this needs to be critiqued. And I think we need to provide life-affirming, loving stories to tell one another, not just young people, that sex is good. Not a tool to abuse one another, but a good thing to love one another. And with the message that culture gives us, most of us aren't ready for sex, no matter the age, until we are in a committed, loving relationship. And I would suggest to young people that it's probably a good idea to wait until you're married. So those are my thoughts, and I'd love to hear what you think. Thanks.